Budget Committee, December 8th, 2021.
Turn on service of the sun, or?
EJ, when I went on my trip, my vaccination card was fine. Nobody questioned.
Yeah,
It's
good.
like, oh my God.
Yeah.
The nurse in me was just being paranoid.
It's all good. It's all good. Rather worry about that.
I'll call the meeting to order. I had a couple of comments already that I think this room is a little on the tight side. We're going to experiment because we thought maybe people could hear better. But some of the meetings after Christmas would be larger too. I think they're really tight for any potential audience. So probably not to go to that after Christmas. So in the meantime, breathe easy. Let's go through the meeting. I'll open with a motion to approve the minutes. I think we all got those in the email, not too long ago.
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second? Okay, Emily, second. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, Emily?
I would just like to add that the part where, we talked about the HDC, I'd like some more detail added into why I suggested the $3,500, and that was just to get the program started and to see where they're at in another year or so. And as a kind of halfway point between this one and what the community was asking for.
Can you get that now?
Thanks. Yep.
Okay. All right, yes.
Martha, can we also add the detail to the recreation committee budget about conversation about the summer camp program being 6% projected lower than actual expenditure in 2021?
6% lower.
Yes. I asked that question as to why they projected 6% lower on summer camp program.
Thank you.
Any other,
Just have a question.
sure.
Under the CEC, I read the Seacoast Economic Development Shareholders Group, is that the name of what is being referred to? I just want to clarify.
Yes, that's
Okay.
one of the 2 meetings that they're attending.
Okay,
The other one is an update from Commissioner Haslam.
okay.
Okay, any other further questions or comments or changes? Okay, I'll take a vote then on the minutes as amended by the 2 suggestions of that. Okay, so all in favor of the minutes as amended? Okay. Any opposed, abstentions? Abstention. Sure, absent. Traditionally, people who are absent abstain on the minutes vote, because there's no logic to that. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the library budget. Typically, what we usually do is have a motion with the selectmen's recommendation as a point of discussion, and then you can go from there. So if someone wants to move for discussion purposes, the bottom line of the library, which is $260,148. What was that, John? It's $260,148. It's all 140.
That's a different amount than what was, is that slightly different than what was in the packet that was handed out last week?
Yes, it is. In your books, you'll see a new number, and the library could address that.
Yeah,
Okay,
if you're ready.
I will,
can-
Hold on,
if someone,
let's,
so,
let's find it first, good?
sure, yeah.
So things like, several of us prepared for the package we got last
Okay,
week.
Yep, yep, that's fine. We get to do the 10, 15, 18, 19, 18.
It's number 18
Yep.
in your binder. Chapter 18.
So it's about $2,000 more, is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Let's move to the one we sent originally, that's all right.
Oh, okay.
Should be up,
Oh, right, okay.
well, 147100, I think.
All right, so if someone wants to make a motion on that, we figure.
So I'll make a motion on the $260,148.
Let's do a second one, Rick. For your discussion, I might add also that if you look at the column as of 11/23/273, that again is a problem with the computer software. They didn't overspend their budget. That includes some of the money from last year that was set aside for the parking construction. So it's really, so that will be corrected, so you get a sense of what they're really spending. That was encumbered last year for the parking project. So they're not buying more books than the budget. Okay, usually I have someone explain things, Laura, if you want to start.
If I may.
Sure, please.
Okay, there's a few different things to just get everybody on the same page. The first thing would be, it was my mistake not to send a corrected budget sooner. There is a small increase due to, a miscalculation on my part. This is going to be the first year that I'm getting the health insurance buyout. So when I originally calculated that into the budget, I made a mistake, because it was the first time I had calculated it. So I recalculated it, and that is what the number you all have now equates. The number is otherwise, that's the only change. Well, right, so the buyout is the actual number that would go on the health insurance line as part of the buyout, but then also FICA increases with the buyout, so that would be the other line that would change. So that explains the small difference there. So you all should have the numbers that, the charts that Martha so helpfully distributed for me beforehand. And I have another one for you, because I just love my charts. So if you could take one and, pass it around. I think I've brought enough for everybody. In fact, let me take one stack and put it over here, so. I'll do two stacks going around, yeah, okay. So basically, I'll start with the ones that you have in your packet. And, I always provide these just because I like for you, I figure if you're on the budget committee, you're numbers people, so I think you would probably be my demographic if I want to talk about the library's productivity using numbers. So this one with these blue columns is an example, shows the circulation numbers, which is also known as checkouts, or commonly known as checkouts, in the library over the past 2 years. And as, of course, you would see, there would be a drop in the 2020 numbers. And 2021, we were closed the first 6 months of the year. We were still doing appointments, but we were not open 6 days a week, and we were not open our full hours. So having that said, that 10,646 is kind of big, because we were not open our full amount for the second half of the year. We were helping people with their downloadable, access to the library and, virtual programs. So that affected the numbers that you see on this other page of charts, which is the comparisons I always like to do to give you perspective. So the Seacoast libraries and the New Hampshire towns with similar populations as Newington, I was very interested to see what this would look like for 2020 because, of course, in 2020, every town did something different when it comes to when they reopened by appointment, when they reopened allowing walk-ins, what they were circulating, what they were allowing to circulate when. So I was pretty amazed to see that yet again, and this has become normal for us now, year after year, we still, per capita, circulated second only to one other library in both categories. So that's really telling me that we managed to do what we do every year, even in 2020. We served our community in a very different way, but still at the same level of high service. Because in the Seacoast libraries, only Portsmouth topped us. And in the towns with similar populations, only Jackson topped us. I do have more information about Jackson that I did not realize. One of the reasons they consistently check out more than we have is that they're part of a library cooperative. So that would actually mean that their patrons have access to 2 other libraries. So that would increase their, their number of items they can check out. The Seacoast libraries do not have a cooperative like that, and I've been told many times that Portsmouth would never allow that because they make so much money on non-resident patrons, like every year paying for non-resident patrons. So if the Seacoast libraries decided to do a co-op, I would not be entirely sure I'd want to be a part of it because Portsmouth wouldn't be anyway, and I don't want all of our awesome books going out to other towns when I think Newington usually just uses our own or occasionally Portsmouth. So anyway, that is to say that I think we did a really good job this year and last year against the odds and delivered what I hoped that we would. The numbers tell me that we did. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share in the form of a chart. You know what? I didn't give myself one of those charts. Oh, there's one more. Okay. So, this one I just made, which is why you didn't have it before. This is just something to watch as far as trends go. As you can see, this shows the kinds of things that go out in the library. So our highest number is books, and then the next is movies, and then after that, I included the New Hampshire downloadables and Hoopla, which are the digital circulation, the things that we can loan digitally. So downloadables provides ebooks and audiobooks, Hoopla provides ebooks, audiobooks, movies, and music. And we added Hoopla as a service last year because of we're trying to increase the access for downloadable items. So this kind of gives you an idea of why our circulation did drop this year in spite of people being really excited to get in and use the library again. Movies were a really high circulation, builder essentially for us for years. And because of all the streaming services that are available now, like Disney Plus and HBO Max, and the pandemic really broadened people's access to that. So most libraries, including us, have seen a big drop in movie circulation, and that is definitely something we've observed, as well as the numbers saying that. But what I do think is worth noting is that the books are spiking back up to where they were pre-pandemic really rapidly. And that's something that we as librarians pay attention to. And we're going to say, well, maybe we don't spend as much money on movies now because people don't want them as much. We buy fewer of those, we redirect those funds toward books, and then you see that number goes even higher. And the other reason I show you this is because most of the time people think that people aren't reading books anymore, and I continue to say that that's not true. People still want books. They still want physical books, and that's what that red line is. It's the physical books, because the ebooks are on these other lower lines, the blue line and the yellow line. So yeah, we're still doing great business at the library, and we had a very busy month in November. It was busier than I expected to be by a lot. So I'm thinking that unless the new high numbers in New Hampshire make people more nervous about coming into the library, I'm seeing that next year we would have, the same kind of numbers as pre-pandemic, kind of be back on the same line. So I guess, other than that, there's one piece of information that I always get asked in this meeting, so I'm gonna say it first. Oh no, I just remembered one other thing. But, in the last year, I always like to share that standard, there's about 800 people in the town of Newington. In a normal year, we usually have about between 300 and 400 active patrons, which is amazing, because that's like almost half of, like a third to a half of the town. That is not the norm for most libraries. In this year, we had 213. That was still really respectable if you consider that a lot of people changed their habits completely during the pandemic. So, but I always like to share that, and only one of them, I'm looking right at you, Jennifer, only one of them was a non-resident. Only one. It's the people who use the Newington Library are not non-residents. They are the people who live here in Newington. So,
Thank you for anticipating my question.
you're welcome. I never forget that you're interested in that, and I find it interesting too. I think it's very fun. And then the last thing
Well,
I was
because it could
going
be a source of revenue, right? I mean, if it was a high volume.
right, absolutely. It would be a source of revenue if it was a high volume, and I would say it's still okay that it's not high volume, because that tells us something, that Newington is serving its own community primarily, right? So the last thing I wanted to say was, I just wanted to share, and I'm sorry that I didn't get this ready to share with you all before now, and this would have been something I should have sent Martha, but not quite that organized. We did actually apply for an ARPA grant this year and received it. We received $1,088 for a grant to benefit the community within the, the library, library services to the community. So what we ended up doing was buying a set of ukuleles that can be loaned to the town, and we're still trying to figure out how to catalog them, which means add them to the collection so they can be checked out. But this includes the ukuleles and also these, they call them Sprout learning backpacks that include different music-related learning opportunities for kids. So that was an opportunity that we had with the ARPA funds, and Miss Amanda said it was a creative opportunity for us to take advantage of. So we applied for it, we got it, and we're just figuring out the logistics of it now. So that's really all I had. So if there are questions about the budget, I'm ready to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on this? Jan?
During COVID, the access to the library was rather limited and closed or various things. Did the wages and salaries go down accordingly during that period of time?
So, no. So there are two reasons for that. One is that behind the scenes, there was a lot more work than you would think. So for example, the curbside pickup, like we were checking the reserve list, we were checking the books out to people and then packaging them up and then putting them outside. So literally checking out, one patron normally takes 5 minutes, now it's taking 10 minutes to 15, depending on what, Then there's also, if it was a rainy day, now we're pulling everything in to put them in plastic, to put them back outside. I spent, during COVID, during that pandemic while we were closed, I was working 60 hours a week. I'm salaried. I was working 60. I was not working less than my scheduled hours. I was working more because I was trying to figure out, reading like all these things about COVID, saying, is it safe for us to check out books? What is the safest curbside procedure? What is the safest configuration for the staff to work in the building. Like, even if we have stuff to do, should two people be in the building at the same time? And we were getting new information all the time. So it was like I was running the library, essentially the same stuff I do when we're open, and then a whole nother part-time job on top of it, just trying to figure out what this COVID thing meant for all of the different things we do in the library. So I was working more. All three of my staff worked almost their full hours every week because they were doing things like when we set up Hoopla, people needed to figure out how to, that's that downloadable, people needed to figure out how to publicize it, like, create stuff to be able to, posters and stuff to be able to put out there, documents or not documents, but like publicity materials for the website, for social media. They had to learn how to use it themselves so they could teach it to people. There was a lot of phone calls that year, actually related to instructing what the, how to use it, troubleshooting. Did you have a question?
I do. Are you specifically talking about fiscal year 2020, or are you guys talking about 2021?
Well, this past year, I would say it was more accessible. But certainly the year before, I was wondering if, because of COVID, there were less hours worked, therefore, the wage would be down. But it sounds like there were, even though the library might not have been accessible to the public, it was directly, stuff was still going on behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily see if you drove by.
Were there any decreases in 2021 versus how much you worked in 2020 to keep it alive?
I don't know if I understand the question, just kind of give me a little more context there.
I'm trying to paraphrase Jamie and tell you the truth.
Sure.
How it relates to this year, is that what you've answered?
Yeah, I was just wondering, basically if the hours went down, is there a savings there? And then if the hours go, but it sounds like the hours didn't go down, so
Okay,
that's
so
basically
the hours
the answer to
only
my
went
question.
down slightly, and I do want to answer, like, the other quick thing I want to say about that is that I was not inclined to lay anybody off or cut hours dramatically, regardless of how much work there was. There was a lot of work, and you're absolutely right that there was more going on behind the scenes than anybody would guess, than I certainly would ever have guessed. But I do want to say that we have seen in this last year, libraries have the same staffing issues that other service professions have. And the libraries that laid people off last year are in big, big trouble because people have left and not come back. And I had the foresight, and my trustees agreed with me to say, if we need to make busy work at times for people, we're better off doing that and keeping our good people. There's only 4 of us, we've all been there for years now. It was like, let's not risk that these people find something else to do during the pandemic, and then when we want to start up again, full speed, full momentum, when our town is ready for us again, not have them there for it because we have to rehire them. So that's where our heads were at, but honestly, there was work for them anyway, so it wasn't really that big of an issue.
Well, Jamie,
Sorry.
for 2021, the staff also opted not to have any pay increase whatsoever.
That's tough. Difficult decision.
And there was so
And
many
that was
face,
their doing, so give credit to them for that.
some of the face-to-face programs, it was Mandy would put on, she was making recordings off-site and posting them on the website. So when you wanted to go like the Friday kids, pre-kindergarten programs, they could go online and review them instead of having to, you couldn't do it in person, so that's how they did it.
So when did you go full-time, or go back to normal, I should say, this year? What was the time, was it June? I can't remember.
So we opened again by appointment, in August 2021, in August 2020. So that really meant that all of our hours were back in the building. It's just that we weren't open our normal hours yet for full service to the public. We were still all working, but we were working in a different, like even the appointments brought different challenges, like cleaning in between them, new tasks that were pandemic related, not library related. But we reopened fully with our full 6 days a week in June of this year.
The appointments were to make sure there wasn't a group, without keeping the sick, so if just 20 people showed up, put a space in law, especially when they check out. So they would only allow 4 or 5 at a time
Mhm.
in there so they could keep them all, keep the
So,
distance.
I understand that you have a philosophy, and I don't disagree with it, by the way, of keeping people during COVID. But if you could predict, how busy were they? So I know that you said they were doing busy work, but were they at 50% capacity? Just, I'm trying to understand, because it's an increase built in here. And, just trying to understand, for 2021, what capacity were they at?
Yeah, so even in, like, for both 2020 and 21, I would, well, for 2020, I would say everybody was at least at 2/3 capacity. I was way over. In 2021, we've basically gone back to normal, we're like 100%, you know.
So it wasn't just doing the busy work?
No, I wouldn't even say there was busy work even last year. I was just saying, we started saying if we need to, we'll do it, and we kind of never did. You know, it was just kind of like, okay, this is what needs to be done, we'll keep doing it. But we would have, but we really didn't. So yeah, I think as far as, you know, I'm hoping that if we ever have another pandemic, that we'll be more prepared and like know what we're, you know, just because this was the first time, we had no preparation, so it would be great if we could like have a plan beforehand and then like have a strategy, so I don't know. And maybe it would reduce the workload in those future years, but it would not necessarily change my approach as far as staffing, just because we are very, very fortunate to still have our staff, and the way that we handled the pandemic is the main reason why.
I think the trustees guided you correctly. You know, you have to take care of your good employees, and if you want them to take care of you, so I think that's appropriate. In terms of, just an observation, I know I was, here last week and was listening to the, historic, group saying, oh, we need some help to categorize these things that we have. Gosh, sounds like a wonderful job for people who are really good at organizing things. So I don't know if there's any communication there that could happen, or collaboration or whatever, but I think that'd be a fantastic use of the existing resources that we have to get a job done, to not spend extra, but to use the resources that we do have.
I completely agree with that, yeah.
But we had you on a shovel order if you need to. We had,
And what helps out,
Yeah, thank you. It
but-
looks like Emily's been doing it.
just an observation from last week to this week.
Yeah. Other questions, Emily?
Yeah, I was just curious, I see that there's an increase in the salaries and wages line. Do you have some sort of internal review, or some sort of review process that either the trustees do, or you do as director?
So, yeah, I evaluate the staff every year, and they evaluate me every year. This year, the realignment raises were based on looking at what was competitive for other libraries on the seacoast, and also libraries of our size. You know, the two charts that I gave you, these are basically who I compare us to. Libraries similar to our size, and then also on the seacoast. And I looked at, and this was my research, based on the public library statistics that are published for New Hampshire every year. So we were a little below average with all 4 of us, and I advocated that in a year where people are leaving our profession very rapidly, we should move that up to a little above average. But as it turned out, it was pretty consistent. We usually do merit raises, and we do merit raises instead of COLAs. And as it turned out, the increases were pretty much about what the COLA would have been this year. So it really wasn't that out of line, but it was absolutely based on comparing other similar positions in libraries that were similar in either of those ways.
Do you guys hold a contract? Do the trustees hold a contract for the librarian?
So I am contracted,
Yeah.
and the other 3 are not.
Is that annual?
Yes.
and another thing we did was, we have substitutes, trained once while the staff members out on sick or on vacation. And they were only at $12 an hour, and we just voted that up to 15, which is reasonable, I think. What they did.
So, on Emily's idea there, on the wages line, okay?
Yep.
So, walking through this one, you guys
Sure.
got an increase there, however, you look at where we were on 11/23/21, we spent about 78% of your total budget allotted at 89% of the year. Do you figure you're gonna come in at 78,000, and why would there be an increase in the last 5 weeks? And secondly, why does it need to increase next year?
So I actually don't have that number, because I don't have that, but I can still answer your question, but I don't actually have that number in front of me. Whatever my budget is doesn't include that column about spent as
Sure.
of. But I can still answer your question, because we have a lot of staff out this year, and 2 of our part-timers don't get, and thank you, 2 of our part-timers don't get paid time off. I mean, well, 2 of our staff are part-time, so they don't get paid time off. This was a difficult year staffing the library, because so many of us had close family members who either died or were seriously ill. So there have been a lot of our staff members that have had to take significant time off. And so those 2 people being out affected our budget a lot, because their hours were either not covered, because it would just be, you know, if there were already 3 people scheduled that day, then 2 people would just cover. And so we didn't have to get subs for some of the time, but otherwise it was subs being here for $12 an hour versus our senior staff members who make more than $12. So this year was a fluke, because we ran less than we usually do as far as staff. But it took a toll on us in other ways, but it definitely means that we're gonna come in under budget this year.
So that's why you're underspent in that
That's
line
why we're
item, because you didn't
underspent.
have paid time off if you were
Right.
on bereavement or reception.
Exactly.
However, you think that'll grow next year?
I think it'll grow in the sense that we should be back to normal, please. Like, I'm just saying, please to the universe. But we should be back to normal as far as staffing the library, with people coming back in and being able to work their scheduled hours, which would mean we're going to pay what we actually budgeted to pay them. But we also want to increase those hourly rates to be competitive for 2 reasons. One is we want to retain our great people and not pay them less than comparable. They could get starting pay at another library. But also, being realistic, if one of them did say, it's time for me to retire, if we try and hire a new person at the rate that that person is working, and it's less than what they can make somewhere else, we're not gonna get a new competent person to replace. So basically, these hourly rates that we're talking about adding are both to retain, hopefully, our good people, but it's also coming up with a competitive rate to replace if we lose people. And it's actually, I'm sorry, just let me finish this one sentence. It's unrealistic to think we won't lose someone in the next few years, because almost no libraries are getting to keep people right now. I mean, people are just not staying in our profession. They are retiring or changing careers right now, like any other service
This
profession.
is going to be a major topic, I think, department by department, as this is the plague that is not COVID, but still in New Hampshire, where it's extremely, in town, the executive office and the budget committee have to decide whether they're just willing to pay increase the rates to hold on to people or to get new people, or how we're gonna compete, because otherwise, we're in the same bucket that everybody else is, because this is not unique to libraries.
I know.
Brandon, if you look at 2020's numbers, some of the salaries and wages, we were almost right on the money. So, like you said, because of less people being able to make it, so I mean, I think we do hit it when we can manage and staff it.
Yeah, this year was weird, but your points are really true, Brendan, and I'm just gonna put something out there very directly and say that without the raise this year, like in 2022 that's in this budget, for me, my rate is right now what the Greenland Library just got a director at for starting pay. And I've been here for 6 years and I have the exact same qualification she has. Her starting pay is going to be making what I make right now. And they had to post that 2 times to get a director, because they posted it for what most of us would have thought was a reasonable starting rate back in the spring, and they couldn't get anyone until they reposted it this fall for what my salary is right now. Now, I did not apply for that job, I didn't want to apply for that job, I love working in Newington, I have no desire to leave, but that was the kind of thing that I've been observing and my trustees and I have been talking about and saying, let's not have our library be lagging behind when we can be proactive. And I, like I said, thankfully, looking at the COLAs and looking at what that line ended up looking like, once we made those changes, it was like, okay, well, good, that's not a real unreasonable change. But it was still like, let's do this, not just for our retention, but to be able to replace people should they leave. Okay, I'm listening.
Any other questions on the budget?
I do. I'd like to know, you have projected checkouts for 21. What were the checkouts January through June while you weren't in full operation? And also with that, if your staff is, say, 60% saturated and you choose to find other work for them, that's an expense to us. So I'm kind of confused at that. Why we would, and I understand the staffing aspect, believe me, I do. I'm in a business that has major staffing issues. But 60% saturation of 4 employees and
Not for employees.
no.
Because remember, I was working more. Like, so,
Right, so,
I mean,
so,
I was
like,
like, yeah.
let me
Yep,
try
sorry,
this.
I'm listening,
Let-
sorry,
We
go ahead.
compare you, because you're salary.
Right.
It's not a.
No, I
you
know.
can't compare it.
And
No, I get it, yeah.
along,
Just saying,
excuse me,
let's still say
along-
3.
okay,
Because
so
don't
3.
include me, yeah,
So-
Yeah,
not including you.
yeah,
I'm stuck in a problem where in 2020, you said you had to figure out how to run the library.
yeah.
So by 21, you know. No?
No, I mean,
Okay.
we changed our operating procedure literally every month for about a year and a half. Because everything we do, even right now, I'm looking at, like, everything we do had to be different constantly depending on what the information we were getting regarding COVID was. So for example, right now, one of the things I have on my to-do list is to measure our programming rooms. All the rooms, the kids' room, the large programming room where we've had candidates nights before, that used to be the whole library. Measure those to come up with 3-foot spaces and an occupancy based on 3-foot spaces versus 6, because we've been allowing people to use the programming room with the social distancing recommendation of 6 feet. And now I'm considering, well, we're gonna do 3 feet so that we can actually hold programs in the library. So that means me measuring the rooms and then publicizing the changes. So it's been like that from all the time. Every time there's a new recommendation, we have to redo everything that we're doing.
Largely, the CDC hasn't changed those recommendations.
So they're still doing 6 feet right now?
I'm saying,
is
if
what
you
you're
look at the
saying?
CDC, and you
Yeah.
follow the CDC,
Yeah.
largely the recommendations have not changed in a year and a half.
So we have,
Also-
oh, sorry, yeah, go ahead, I'm listening.
If you already have 6 feet and you're
Yeah.
gonna go to 3,
Yeah.
divide by 2, right?
Except the space is not uniform. So it does include like, it's more, everything has been more complicated than you would think looking at it. And that's all I can explain is like, everything has taken just more wiggling, and we have not always followed the CDC recommendations, and we're probably not going to follow it right now, because people seem to want to use the library more than they have been, which means, I mean, my trustees and I have already agreed that we're changing to 3 feet. We don't just blanket follow the CDC, because if we did, we wouldn't be serving the town of Newington what Newington wants. So it's been a balancing,
It's not
set of
necessarily,
decisions.
I don't think you're going down this path, Chris, but this isn't necessarily a referendum on how you manage the library.
No.
It's strictly
No.
about, if you have underutilized wages there,
Right.
is there an opportunity where there's some savings potentially if everybody
Right.
tightens their belt? I think that's what we generally.
Yes, that's what, I'm not trying to manage the
No,
library, that's your job.
I
That's
can see
not
that as
what
an
I was trying,
example.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's not what I was trying to do.
No,
Just,
yeah.
at a 60% saturation, I would expect that the hours would decline.
Except that then we would have risked losing people. And I don't agree with you that, respectfully, I disagree that that was a cost to the taxpayer with the money, the hours that people were spending. Because everything that our staff did during the pandemic, even if there were times when it was like, okay, well, you're just sitting here in the library handing out curbside, items, like, and you're not like actively packaging them, you're still working on something that is of benefit to the library when we reopen.
Right.
Benefit to the patrons when we reopen. So I feel like, I don't feel like busy work was a real issue, even at our, slowest times. But, I still feel like if it had been, I would have stood behind it, because again, like, it's a lot easier to serve the town of Newington with a full staff that is experienced and not being retrained and not being paid more than, the people who are getting, that have served the town for years, so,
Okay, my last question
Yeah.
on patrons. That 213,
yeah.
is that June through November?
No, that's the whole last year.
So it's all 2020.
Yes, it's actually from November 2020 through the end of November 2021,
Okay,
because I wanted to do the full year. Like, so it would start like December 1st to the end of November, because I don't have this year's.
so that would include people doing curbside at that point?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
One thing that might help the budget committee swallow, just for the trustees' info, are swallow just the rate increase higher. And I'm not assuming that you don't use some kind of a hybrid attack here, but if you guys in public meeting could present a couple of different ways where you are focusing on employee retention, not just I'm gonna pay them more. Potentially that would be a little bit more appetizing to the budget committee. And this is part of our plan. The $3 raise an hour is part of our plan to keep our health and for years to come. That, maybe that helps a little bit more. We should pay them more and keep their hours going. Just food for thought. I don't know if anybody disagrees with that.
It is part of a plan. It absolutely is, yeah.
Any other comments?
I just have two quick questions on, other line items. The electricity line item, seems to be overspent for this year, if I'm seeing that correctly. $7,198, and the budget was $6,000. I'm just curious if that's a mistake, or if that's,
I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm having, there it is. So, yeah,
and then the other question I have along the same lines is the water line, a couple lines down is also kind of, as of 8/31/21, it was $64, and as of 11/23, it was $17.41. I just don't know if those are accurate or if those are errors.
so the electricity, I'm sorry, I would have to look into, I don't think I've looked at this report about, like, including the electricity, so I can't state that. I can say the water is accurate, and what happens with the water is that when, like, we don't use very much until the summer with our lawn. And this summer, the lawn was like dead and recovering, so it was a high summer for use of the water, the lawn, irrigation. So like, that's where that jump came, so that is accurate for the water, but
Just to clarify, there were no line transfers from 820?
line transfer,
Yeah, transfers of money out of that line.
no,
That is 100% course of water.
yes,
Well, not only that, the cemetery
Yeah.
water supply goes through our meter.
that's right, yeah.
We donate water to the cemetery,
Yeah.
only because it's too expensive to put another meter in.
Yeah. Electricity is weird though, Emily, that does look high to me too, but I have not investigated why, because this is the first time I'm noticing that big of a spike, so I'm not sure.
But going forward on the electrical bill and other utility bills, is we are going to look more closely at them. And one particular thing is when we start up the air conditioning system, we get a bounce in our demand meter because we're 3-phase power. So we're gonna look in, as we're changing HVAC contractors, to do something with a sequence start rather than an abrupt start of all the air conditioning at one time, which will reduce the demand.
Any other questions on the library budget?
Yeah, I'd like to go, I'm sorry.
You can have a chance, okay, go ahead.
I hit line item number 900, which is the operating expenses. You guys were very accurate as of November 23rd, coming in exactly the dollar. Are you gonna overspend that line item?
No.
Okay. And a follow-up to that is that you have the next worksheet that shows this budget worksheet. And there's some duplicate lines in here, and I don't understand why they're under the operating budget like maintenance.
Right. So that is, there are two sections of the library budget. As far as, and so like when you're looking at this is the town managed lines in the sense that payroll and electricity and, water and a certain amount of maintenance is paid for by town hall. Like they cut the checks, they get the bills, but everything that's on this budget worksheet is paid for by the library. We get the bills, we cut the checks. So for example, the maintenance that gets paid for, by the library, that's the cleaning company. Like they contract with me and I cut them the check, and that's the biggest bulk of that line. The maintenance line in that segment, that takes the most of it, is the cleaning. But there are also repairs that can be taken from that library, and also routine maintenance of the building are part of that line. So, that is sort of like, it's not so much that it's really just that some maintenance items are managed by the town, but the majority of them are managed by the library, because we're the ones responsible for the building.
So the 2999 on your town budget is half of what the maintenance budget is for the building, or is it supplemented by trustees?
So the 29.9, sorry, I guess, where are you getting the 29.99
And
from?
that's what you asked for, the department and the selectmen meeting for the operating expenses budget for 2022.
Oh, yes, okay, so that is, in part, it's the maintenance, and it's also things like the telephone. We contract for a bookkeeper to do our bills, she's on there too. So I'm
that's
just
in
sort of like,
addition to this,
it's all
the
on
budget worksheet?
this page.
It's all on this.
It's on this page. So like everything that's on this page is actually listed, like, or not listed, but it's included in that one operating expenses line that's on this page. So it's like a breakdown of that one line.
Which is what I manage.
It's sub.
Right,
Yeah.
that's why they match,
It's
exactly.
their internal
Yeah.
accounting
Yeah.
procedures,
Exactly.
for the town system.
So I include this as a, as transparency to show you this is how we're spending those operating expenses. And also to show you how we spend our trust money, because we gross budget our trust fund money every year.
Yeah, it's probably the only budget where part of the budget is not funded by the town, but
Right.
so much comes out of the trust fund, so we try to, keep a level budget as we can, and we'll have to take, and then the trust funds all depends on how the market's doing. Sometimes we get good returns, and only they get is what they made that quarter.
How is the trust fund doing?
What's that?
How is the trust fund doing now?
How much we get every quarter, remember that?
1,600.
16?
Yeah.
Oh, 1,600 a quarter, something like that.
So I have a question, and it's my naivete. Can some of that, interest that you're making on the trust fund be used to fund the increases for salaries? Or is that not, you can't do
Not
that?
allowed to.
Yeah, you have to be able to know that it can be generated every year for it to, for any money that you're using for salaries or wages. So trust, we have a limited amount of access to trust, so it could run out and then we wouldn't be able to fund it anymore.
We can only spend without what's the interest. We can't,
Right, you
so,
can't spend the principal.
whatever,
on
yeah.
this one.
at one time, we were taking the interest, I think, out of the operating costs, whatever you call them, management costs, and we met with the trustee of the trust fund, the recommendation was, take that out of your, profit that quarter, keep your trust funds, solid, keep it steady.
We do offset our operating expenses with trust funds as much as we can. But we are going to be looking at eventually reducing that because $1,600 per quarter from our trust funds is actually less interest than we've been getting the last few years. So at some point, we're going to be looking at changes, but this year we're not.
If we don't budget for it, we can't spend it.
It still doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Somehow you budget $30,700. You spend exactly $30,700 on things like office supplies, general supplies, promos, and publishing, equipment purchases, somehow it's exact. And then, but the trust fund money, the $21,750, or last year it was supposed to be $27,000, did that get spent?
No. So we don't have to spend the entire trust fund every year, and we would rather not, because the more that we spend every year, the less we have when we need it. So the trust funds are a big reason why we can be so exact with those other numbers, because for example, like, you can see collection development, that's like what I spend on books and DVDs and, magazines. So collection development, our town budget line is meaning part of this budget, right? It's part of this, but it's under the operating expenses line. It's $8,500, and I'm gonna spend exactly $8,500 from that line. But I also have $4,000 budgeted over here on trust funds, and I probably won't spend exactly $4,000. I'm gonna spend close to it because we need that every year. Like $8,500 is not cut it for the appetite that New England has for the library, for new items at the library, I should say. But I'm not gonna spend exactly $4,000. So the trust funds have helped with certain lines that we know we're gonna overspend. Has given us a little bit of a cushion, and is also why we can be so exact with those other operating.
Okay, any further questions?
Can I just say, Brandon, I would love to just have a meeting with you sometime, because this is the second time that I've seen you trying to like wrap your mind around the way that we function with our budget with these two prongs, and I'd be happy to clarify any questions sometime.
Appreciate it. If there are no further questions, are we ready to vote on the budget? On the question amendment, so we have a bottom line of $260,148. All in favor of advancing this to the public hearing? Say aye, raise your hand. Okay, good. Is that good count? Any opposed or abstentions?
I'm opposed tonight.
Okay. The record shows, Glenn is opposed. Okay, great. Thank you very much, library. I think, a very good, excellent. I was surprised, but I guess you mentioned, in terms of the normal way you count productivity, like checkouts and other things, the numbers were down, but because of COVID, it took more man-hours or woman hours to generate those numbers. It's like trying to march in the rain or in the mud. It just slowed down the normal productivity. Just to turn out that level of normally,
Just according, I'd call up when we did the curbside checkout and say,
yeah.
pick out 2 books for me, and almost every time they're right on it. They get to know the crate sheets enough that you can know
Yeah, I
have
mean,
to
it's
go and pick
a lot
up.
more service per person because we went there, so we were looking for the books as opposed to having us do self-service.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Okay. I don't really go on.
Jack.
Not read aloud, read.
Need those little clips that go on your sleeve.
They won't see me, he's too big.
Wow.
No, this one.
10:13.
Okay, so entertain a vote to accept the selectmen's recommendation, which is $1,884,790 for 2022. Do I have a motion for that effect? A motion from Jennifer, and a second? Second from Rich. Okay, good. Normally I'd have TJ go ahead and explain basically the initial part, and then we'll take questions after that. So,
Evening, everybody.
Evening.
So, in going down through, if you want, I can kind of shoot line by line. We can look at everything. Salary increase, so I'll go over the top end of compensation first. Salary is going up approximately $9,229. That is reference to the contractual step and COLA for both the assistant chief and myself. Holiday pay is going up approximately $307, which is the increase from salaries. And sick pay is going up approximately $3,356, and that includes the increase in salaries and the full liability of the buyout for that. So the total increase in compensation side is $12,121. As far as
I want to make a note now to be aware of, this increase only goes through, as I understand it, the first 3 months of the year. Then there's going to be a town warrant that votes on the new negotiated contract. No?
no, so there's actually nothing to do with the firefighter's contract in here at all. This
Is
is
this
just, and this nothing, because that's all
The
warrant
warrant
article.
article, the union warrant article will.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
The union warrant article will increase their salaries beginning, assuming it's accepted, beginning in April.
Correct.
So what we're doing is, this budget covers the contract so far. There's going to be a warrant article that's going to pay for any negotiated increase.
So would it,
So this contract
this would go
is
away, this piece
our,
of it?
well, so this right is, since that you have the numbers in front of you, is Pat and I's contractual obligations, and then, for the entire year. And then the union stays status quo until April 1st, pending warrant article passes, then this will increase by that amount of the warrant article.
So the union has been out of collective bargaining since 2019, so they have not had raises. So this is a status quo, everyone makes exactly the same as they are, other than the people who are not in the union. Does that make sense?
It does, where I was getting confused was saying, the 12 here, that's 24 hours per week. Okay, so this here is the two of you.
So this is the entire union. At the
Status
current
quo.
rate of pay today, because if the contract fails, they have no raise, no change, no anything.
Okay.
So we still have to staff, so that is the staff. The only salary adjustment is the two non-union employees, the chief and myself, based on the selectmen's appointed 3% COLA and the 1.5 step given by the board based on contract and performance evaluation. That make sense?
Thank you.
So on the benefits side, health insurance has decreased due to rate reduction, approximately $19,121. Life and disability is going up approximately $2,036 to get the proper funding, with a caveat from your email earlier today that the numbers might have changed. It might reduce $1,000 ballparkish, so that might actually go down. We'll get the exacts on that, but FICA Medi went up $224, and retirement, so last year was a half year of 31.5%, 30.5%.
Yeah, 30.
And then in July 1st, retirement rates went up to 32.99%. So the increase in this of the 26,262 is for the 32.99 for the entire 12-month period. So the increase on the benefit side is $9,401. And on the bottom side, operations of the budget, telephone, which encompasses everything, the landlines, cell phones, internet, that type of, is gonna go up about $510, and that's just the increase in price plans. Ambulance billing We're reducing that by $500. So when I first got here, we changed billing companies to try and get a better, return. And we've had the same company for 2 years. We are not happy with them at all. And effective January 1st, we're changing to another company at a reduced percentage rate, because we were paying 7%. Now we're gonna drop down to 6%. And we're hoping to get there's a couple of the departments around here that use this company as well, and they have a much higher return than we. So we're gonna utilize that, and hopefully the revenue incoming will, be higher.
So they're management fee to perform
Yes,
service?
yep, it's a percentage based off
Yes.
whatever the billing
Okay.
is, yep,
And,
absolutely.
and how much is the revenue, and I know it doesn't go back to the fire department, but how much is the revenue for ambulance?
So as of today, we're currently sitting right around $115,600, but we still have not had, that's everything.
That's
So, I'm
everything.
sorry, that's everything. So as of, we're around 35,000, but we still have not gotten income for November, December.
That's for the ambulance?
That's just for the ambulance. So if you're talking all revenues between permits and all that other stuff and fees, we're about 115,000 right now. You know, we still have the rest of the month to go, and then 2 months of the ambulance income.
So we had switched companies in that, beginning of 2019. And the company's a smaller company out of Vermont, was offering significant increases in collection. They're smaller, they can pick and choose and get better collections, and they've just not delivered. They're not capable of delivering. So if you look at our ambulance revenues.
They don't have it.
Oh, our ambulance
So prior
revenues
to,
are down fairly significant.
you know, just looking at it real quick, you know, from 2012 to 2018, it was anywhere between, you know, $55,000 to $112,000 income. And over the last couple of years, we've been at 77, 58, and 34. So obviously COVID's a big hit because people stopped going to the hospital. So it's, you know, we'd like to see that number come back up to where it was before, you know, so we can have those funds, so.
How's the billing though? Is it, do you guys control the cost of services?
We do, so we are actually one of the highest charging departments in the state. But you could charge what it is
Your insurance company really are.
you're right, correct.
You know,
I can charge $100,000 for the ambulance ride, and Medicare says here's $50.
Yeah.
And I have to take the $50 and I write off the other. Obviously, if you're a resident, whatever your insurance pays, that's it, and you don't get billed for anything else. Obviously, if you do get billed, please let us know, we'll get rid of it. But it's really the insurance companies are driving everything, so.
So they say that you should bill at 100% over Medicare rate is what the going standard is for big cities. We're billing roughly, I think, 150%. Because we're a smaller department, they recommend a higher rate. A lot of private insurances will settle somewhere in the middle. When you're a Dover running 28 calls a day, you can get a little bit less for each call and still make out. Where you're a smaller town running less calls, they say bill at a higher rate. So we are one of the higher rates in the area. Not proud of it, but it had served us well. And unfortunately, this collection agency is just not performing what the bill gives us goal.
And so we gave them a decent chance and a big enough window, granted, yes, COVID hit, but COVID affected everybody. So we didn't like where we're at, so we're changing, so.
You found a new company?
We did find a new company at a reduced rate, so that's why we were able to cut that cost from the ambulance moving fees.
Question about that in terms of the fact that we have our own ambulance and we're billing. Has the department considered subcontracting to an ambulance service versus doing it ourselves?
So, yes.
It's not a recommendation, it's a question.
No, absolutely. So yes, we've explored different avenues. There are a lot of different departments in the area that do different things. Fire departments, some run EMS, some don't. The general consensus from those that don't is the quality of service becomes an issue. So I can guarantee the provider that showing up to your house at 2 o'clock in the morning on the worst day of your life, because I hired them, I trained them, I know them. Once we contract that out, we don't have any control. I will say the city of Rochester has just signed a contract for $700,000 for ambulance service for the city of Rochester.
That's just for overdose.
Correct. So, I would think that What the factor goes into is how busy the ambulance would be for the area. So we would not get an ambulance for Newington. We would be getting an ambulance most likely out of Northampton. So we would be waiting for an ambulance to come from Northampton to get to your house. We could provide care until that time, but we could throw you in a fire truck and drive you to the hospital faster than the ambulance would get there from Northampton. So there comes this give and take. If you're a big enough community and they're willing to put an ambulance in, then there's some potential benefits, but you lose all control of the staffing. So you'll find most, I bet, in the next 10 years that aren't providing ambulance to the fire department will be. Rochester is probably the biggest one that isn't, and the $700,000 contract has them reevaluating that very quickly. So,
Thank you.
It kind of comes out in the wash too at some point, right? I mean,
Correct.
the amount that we're typically billing is usually double what we're getting this year and.
Correct, and just to go back to the revenue numbers, over the last 10 years, obviously, you know, it was still a couple more months, we wanted close to $700,000, you know, and then to add in permits and detail and fees and permits and everything, we're over $1.1 million that the department's brought into the town. Right?
The other offset is that ambulance allows the staffing. I mean, a city like Rochester, bring Rochester, because they don't run an ambulance. Their staffing is lower than it should be if they had an ambulance. At some point, I still need a certain number of people on a fire truck. We leave the ambulance behind. So I don't think you really see a cost savings for the town in staffing and not having the ambulance, because we still need the firefighters here. We're fortunate that they're cross-trained, so we don't have just 2 people sitting on the ambulance and 3 firefighters. We have, you know, 3 to 4 people on duty depending on the time of day. And you just take the ambulance instead of the fire truck. So we don't have that ability to cross-staff. So I don't think there really be a cost savings. Even if you hire a private company and we're paying them several $100,000 a year, I don't think you'd see much of a cost savings because you still need people to run fire trucks. So they're still gonna show up first, they're still gonna be there, they just don't have the ability to bring you to the hospital.
We good? Moving on. So lease equipment and programs, that's gonna increase about $850. And that's due to software, increases due to ongoing, continuing, equipment issues with communication between us and Rockingham County due to our dispatch. Computer expenses has gone up $1,000, and that's just the cost of materials right now. The exact same computer that I got 2 years ago was $600, it is now $900. It's the exact same thing. So staying on our schedule of replacing equipment and being proactive about it, I'd like to increase that by $1,000. Alarm maintenance line, $691, the needed upgrades that we asked for last year for the additional $10,000 is, it'll be done by the end of the year. And so that $10,000 that we asked for is coming back out. Now, as a reminder, that line is part of that permit, so those funds come back into the town and go into the general fund, so it's essentially self-supporting.
Which one are you on?
691.
It's out on the last page. How are your fees with that?
Tough to compare. We're one of the few departments in the area that still run a radio box system. So in the state, comparing it to the Seacoast area, it's difficult because most places don't want to run it because there is some upkeep to it. Comparatively across the state, we're right in the middle of that billing. Some are a little bit higher, some are a little bit lower. Our big advantage for why we want to continue to maintain it is it's self-supporting, it's funded, I mean, it's a revenue source for the town. And B, with our limited staffing and limited staffing model, it gives us a 5 to 7 minute heads up on a fire alarm activation, so it gets our guys out the door and that much closer. So that if it's an issue, we're getting a little bit of a jump start on it, because when the fire alarm goes off in the building, we know it right away. Whereas, you go into Portsmouth, the fire alarm goes off, that fire alarm calls a third-party monitoring system. That third-party monitoring system then has to call the dispatch center then has to dispatch out the company, so there's a delay, so.
So is it required for different buildings, or is it not?
So it is required that there is a monitoring company. Right now, for the town of Newington, we provide that. So we provide all the monitoring, so if you don't wanna pay ABT, you don't have to, we monitor the fire alarm for you as defined by the NFPA guidelines.
You charge them the fee, is that?
We charge them $350 annually. So it roughly brings in $22,000 a year worth of revenues for the $4,100 of maintenance fees that's associated with it.
That sounds like a positive service, though, doesn't it?
It is.
Absolutely.
It is a moneymaker, roughly $20,000 a year. of
You should
revenues.
explain that to the industrial development committee. This is another sales point there.
Right, and like Pat had mentioned that, so when the fire alarm goes off at Woodcraft, we get notified the exact same time the call goes up to the third-party company, and there's a lot of times that we're either just about on scene when we're getting toned out. So that's potentially 5 to 7 minutes that the fire, if there was a fire or an issue, is not getting that much worse.
What do you expect they would pay annually to an ADT?
Couldn't even tell you that.
Couldn't tell.
No idea.
No, so I will say, we,
$350.
you're right.
Probably more than 350.
I'm sure it is, I'm sure it is. But that being said, the ADT system probably provides more service than just telling the fire department that the fire alarm is going off. When you look at the radio box system we have, the city of Salem, New Hampshire has a similar. They're a little bit higher than we are, they're about $400 a box. Portland, Maine, I believe, or South Portland, they're like $150 a box. So it really varies as to depending upon what you want to look for. So we're right in that middle. You know, and it becomes a question as to how profitable does it become for the town? Where do we draw that line? So we figure that the middle of that road is the comfortable spot to be, to provide the service that we can, without being greedy with it.
It's like the ambulance phone. And then the only other line that we're looking at going up on a little bit is equipment and vehicle purchases of $1,500, and that's the same thing as the computers. Everything is just getting more expensive. Not saving
On
anything.
that, why does it say vehicle purchases?
Because that was done by the town last year, because it has to be in that line, or that title has to be in.
So when the warrant article for the new fire engine went through last year, the auditors recommended that the selectmen add vehicles to that line without funding it, so that if for some reason the warrant article failed, but the selectmen were contractually obligated to purchase the engine because they signed a purchase and sales agreement on the order,
That's what
it
it's
allowed them a way to do that with an unassigned fund balance. So that was recommended by the auditors last year.
And so the difference between 21 and 2022 is an increase of $15,654.
Which is very good, but just to remind you, folks, it doesn't include the new labor contract to add to that one. Okay, any further questions on this subject?
Just a quick question on the revenue again, so it's
Yes.
115 and 22, right? Is it, if my math is correct?
In 21,
Yes.
we're currently at
So far.
115,000. Yep.
Okay, but then the 22 for this alarm maintenance thing, oh, that was part of it?
Yes, that was including that. Yep.
And that goes to the general fund.
All that goes to the general.
So the reason why I'm asking is if that's going to the general fund, that's $115,000 in terms of how that can be used to either help the tax rate or not spend it or whatever. So that's why I kind of want to make that point.
Yeah, it's part of the revenue of the town, that's part of the
Yeah.
revenue. It's not a dedicated pot of money, it goes into our general revenue.
Yeah.
And we, then, that way we get to decide how we want to spend it.
Or not.
Hang on, that's right. Richard?
Chief, question for you.
Yes.
Do you anticipate, we all know all material costs are going up, but I noticed fire protection clothing stayed the same for 22.
So our plan that we had in place for the replacement of equipment, we're doing really well with it, so we don't anticipate having to buy a couple sets additional next year. So with the price increases, because I think in the last 18 months, it's gone up almost 25 or 30% anyways. It seems like every 6 months it goes up 10%, 10%, 10%. Yeah, we're doing really well right now, so we think we can stay status quo with that line, and not have to go asking for additional because we need price increases.
The one thing that's been huge for us, knock on wood, is we've been okay with employee retention. So when we hire part-time employees, depending upon their size, we have to buy them gear. So we've been pretty good with employee retention right now. It's always a concern for the future, but as long as we don't hire giants or really small people, we've been pretty good.
No offense.
Yeah, but as someone who, everywhere I go is a problem. So we've been good with employee retention, so that has allowed us to be in a pretty good cycle for gear instead of having to someone shows up that we wanna hire and we have to spend money on gear right away because they're, 6'12" or however you wanna look at it. That's it. I know, don't correct. So we've been pretty good on it, so we're hoping to continue that trend. I'm done.
How about line over expenditures and transfers out of different line items? You guys have a report on that for this year, what happened there?
For any particular line,
Well, I'm not gonna include the benefits lines, but other than that, any of the, all of them?
so if you're looking at 119, the detail line, the 92,500 or 499. So that was offset, that was actually all income into the town from the vaccine clinic. So that was paid out in the detail, so that's why we left, so that, there's a dollar in that line to keep it open, but I can't say whether, we're gonna do a detail or not, so I don't fund any money in there. That was sitting there for no reason,
So that was 92,500 that was expended,
Correct, out of 118,000
that came in.
that came in. Yep.
Gotcha. Not-
So I believe the
unassigned
town-
balance, Martha? The balance goes to the unassigned balance, unassigned fund?
Yeah, so the breakdown of that was, in the end, $8,942.73 went back into the general fund, or unassigned fund balance.
So in addition to 115,
That's included.
that's still included in 115.
Yes,
And those figures covered out the FICA and everything else.
yes, yep, absolutely.
Any of you who went to Rochester for your vaccine shots, you would meet some of the New Hampshire fire crew there, and they did a very good job. They were very professional. Didn't surprise me.
Yeah, any other ones?
Yep, life and disability, that was underfunded. So that's why that number was higher, plus because the vaccine clinic kind of screwed with a couple of the lines.
So life and disability is based off payment. Well, the vaccine clinic theoretically threw off the life and disability, but it was difficult to try to calculate those cents in on the dollar on the detail line. Does that make sense?
Sure, so that all contributed to retirement, I'm sure, too?
So it did, but though the retirement costs were easily recouped in the ancillary fees of the detail. So we pay out at a rate, but we bill an administrative fee on the detail. So the administrative fee was able to recover the retirement costs. Generally, all of our employees except the chief are not eligible for retirement on details, except the state made an exception for these COVID clinics. So the detail rate covered it, the admin fees for those, but all of the part-time employees who work most of the details, there's no retirement fees on that. So the administrative fees cover Fedi, Medi, and all of the others, so. Does that make
So
sense?
where'd the money come from? Where'd you find the extra, the over expenditure?
On,
Where did you transfer it out
on which one?
of? For your 215?
Weston, we haven't yet, we haven't moved any funds yet.
Okay. What else?
Leased equipment program, at 971. Was for the increase, so that was part of the offset of the new programs that we have to get for the communication issues we have with Rockingham County to assist in that, so we're covered essentially. So Rockingham County, you may have seen in the news, is building a new complex, $30-something million, I believe, 60, sorry. They're moving their dispatch center to this new building. They're not buying new equipment, they're moving the existing equipment that's already old as is to the new building. Which is an issue for us, because we have communication issues here in town, dead spots or low spots that aren't great, so we even have the issues at the station, so if they set off a tone, they're supposed to use this program that doesn't always work, so we have a backup system in place to catch it in case it doesn't work. And that's what part of those program, that fee is that, and,
That's all that.
and then the task app is a communication with our cell phone providers to turn those into radios on a cellular level.
Fortunately, being the outside edge of the county, radio reception is an issue. So we're working technology in our favor to work through that without investing thousands and thousands of dollars in repeater systems and things that are antenna mounted. So.
Dues and subscriptions, that was actually part of that, the task, the app, is the dues, for the subscription, I'm sorry. Office supplies, that was, we had to get some new equipment because our fire prevention officers, or the fire prevention office, had a desk failure, if you will, so we had to buy a new desk, or hand down, so,
It was a donated desk, so
Yeah.
we'll start with that.
it had a good life. And that's it for the overages right now, but I mean, we're, you know, if you look at the budget and pay attention to it, there's gonna be some extra that will cover any overages.
Do you figure it coming in less than your 2021 budget?
Less than 2021, yes,
For this fiscal year, for 2021.
yes, we'll come in under budget.
Congratulations.
Any further questions?
So COVID has been very challenging for everyone, of course. I imagine it takes, just as we just talked about the library, it takes more work to do the same amount of output. It's probably the same in the fire department. Federal funds and grants to help assist those kinds of extra work to do the same kind of stuff. Do we have any access to any federal grants?
So we have, as far as
to help
our
and assist?
COVID costs we've had to date, it's turned over to town hall, they have gone in to recoup the costs from the state or the federal levels for those overages.
We are currently working on a grant that came out to help offset staffing with equipment, which just got approved by the selectmen Monday night, so we'll be applying for that. So it's a $30,000 piece of equipment that essentially, instead of having to take two people to lift a big person into the back of the ambulance on a stretcher, you can push a button and it loads it in. So we're working on that. Those are because of COVID funds, so we're working on that grant paperwork right now. We are exploring all grant avenues as much as
Yeah, I
possible.
mean, I
The money's
imagine
out there.
there's federal, you hear about stuff in the news, and I don't know if there's any applicable to actually the town of Newington specifically to the fire, and maybe to library and maybe other places.
Yeah, there's some stuff out there, they've got some of them, like this one that I was talking about, has some funny verbiage to it.
Yep.
So as to offset manpower issues or anything, staffing issues or anything like that, so.
And it also takes time to find and locate these grants, and they're not free, obviously.
So we're currently, you know, we got approved Monday night at the meeting, we're going for 3 separate grants, this year that just opened up, so.
So no strings attached to them, or are there?
There's
Right.
minimal,
So it's
just like percentage cost, this one that Pat was talking about, because it's a Homeland Security and a federal, the one Pat's talking, is that a 5%?
That's a
10% match. So, one thing we can do though is the 10% match could come out of the capital line for the ambulance equipment, because it has to do with the ambulance in a power line. So that money theoretically could come out of the, capital line and would have no, impact on the taxpayer. So that, we had that offset already there. One of the other grants is only a 5% match because of the size of the town, so, yep. And that 5% match is another capital line, so, again, was funding there, so.
How are these grants advertised to you guys? I mean, you guys
Paul.
go seeking them?
Yeah,
or-
Paul Deschaines been
or
very
do
good.
people bring it to you?
No,
How
we
do
get a
you know
lot of,
where to start?
so, one thing that we haven't done on our end is, there's a handful of companies out there that will do grant writing for you,
Yeah,
but they charge several $1,000s to do it.
right.
So we're trying to save those money, we're doing it, and like the warrant, the grant that we went for PT equipment, the $15,000, we ended up getting the grant, we have almost all the equipment now, so that $15,000 warrant article is getting turned back in. We never used it, which was the plan
Right.
going forward, you know. So that just, it worked out perfect, so there's another $15,000 that's getting turned back in.
I just hate to have grants exist that we don't know about,
Correct.
and then they expire,
Yeah.
we don't get access to
No,
them,
absolutely.
we're just not aware of.
So absolutely.
We have reached out to the state level, to some senator offices and whatnot to find out about grant information.
Sure.
To find out, there was some discussion about grants with the opioid crisis, and unfortunately, we just don't qualify for some of those, but we've explored grants, and government money is government money, so.
We'll take it.
How much you guys spend on the boat next year?
No major equipment, for the boat will be needed, some new life jackets and whatnot, but nothing of significance.
Where do you find that?
The life jackets?
Well, anything that has to do with it, there's no line item for that.
No, it's equipment purchases.
Just equipment purchases
So
or
it falls
PPE
under-
or anything like that. Yep.
So
Does the
new
boat
boats.
require special training for some, or can any of the guys drive it?
Yep, they're
So,
all licensed.
yeah, all of our, full-time employees are licensed.
Yeah.
Through the Coast Guard license course like any other boat operator. We were, hosting a Coast Guard, rescue operator class that was gonna happen here at Town Hall. And unfortunately, due to some staffing issue with the Coast Guard, it fell through, so that will be on the docket for next year, for spring of next year. It was supposed to be September?
Yes. Yep.
And that was gonna be here at Town Hall, and all of the full-time employees are gonna be required to take it. It's rescue boat operators, it's a higher level certification, I can't even speak as to the extent of the class.
And the Coast Guard, basically covers the cost of
So,
it? and you
yeah,
guys
so
just
this
show up?
class, there's only 2 places to do it in the country, and one of them is Alabama. And they charge $25,000 just to put on the class.
Right.
So Coast Guard was gonna do it for us for free.
That's fantastic.
I mean, obviously just the usage and whatever, and that, so that's, we're gonna have that asset, so hopefully it'll all work out for the spring.
Great.
How about the 2020 warrants? How does those make out?
The 2020 warrants.
2021 warrants, I should say, that we looked at in 2020.
So we're still waiting for the pickup truck.
Yeah, where's that?
Yep.
Good question.
It would not be in this budget, Fran. It's in last year's budget.
Right, so I'm wondering if it's, I always forget this detail, does it hang around until the money's expended? or-
So we're gonna ask for an encumbrance for what's remaining on that line to carry over from the pickup truck. if
And
it
that would
doesn't
be
get
under our warrant budget, not,
The money's already been voted, that there's a
Correct.
warrant.
So we have a VIN number for the vehicle and the contract. So
Yeah.
if the vehicle, we're waiting, it should be here any day. which I
California
think-
sitting off the coast somewhere?
No, it's in the country,
It's
it was
in the
built in the
country.
country. Yep, so, it may still be waiting on approval.
If they don't take delivery and pay for it, that money is already contracted, will be
right,
Correct.
obligated.
and then, your gym equipment?
So that was.
All of it except for one piece is here.
And that was not, didn't go through as the warrant, that ended up being a grant.
Yep,
If you remember
so
at the
that-
time it
That
was.
15,000 gets turned back in.
So when the budgeting process starts, it's long before the grant season opens. So we put that in as the warrant to move it forward, and then as the grant season went forward, we were
So
awarded.
there
the
was a
grant.
grant?
Yep.
So we got a grant for it, so there was no capital.
Yep. Yeah, we got awarded,
So that'll be turned back in.
end of August, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then how about your building moving forward? I know that's probably a different, that's town buildings, right, John?
It is, what we could do is we could vote on this budget, and then a couple of other, I want to discuss a couple of warrants too, so that might work. So let's finish up on the budget in front of us. If there are no further questions, we can vote on this bottom line.
Make a motion to,
Okay, the motion's on the floor.
motion's on the floor, right?
So if there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the bottom line for the fire department at 1,884,790. Okay?
Is that?
Calculator's good. Are there any objections or, no objections, no, any, suspensions? No, good, okay, thanks. Now, I wanted to just about, might touch on a few things. We know that the collective bargaining warrant will be the biggest item that we, present to the town. Who represented the town on the negotiating team?
There were 2 board of engineers and 2 selectmen.
And two selectmen and 2 board of engineers.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. So presumably, the selectmen will come forward and recommend that warrant.
We will.
Yeah. And just to remind folks that in terms of labor law, when the negotiating team comes to an agreement, they are required to recommend that agreement because that was what they negotiated. That's called good faith negotiating. They can't change their mind. The town can, and the budget committee can. We are independent agents who will decide. But the selectmen, by law, will have to recommend what they, legally negotiate. Okay, that's for that. Any other, besides, you know, every year we add money to different capital reserves. Any other warrants that are different from you that you're gonna
So we
present?
did not fund, vehicle major repair. Because we originally put it, when we split it 2 years ago, we put the $25,000 away. And then last year, you guys gave another 25,000 for the town. So we capped that at 50 grand, figured that's a safe, comfortable number. SCBA, we did not ask for any funds this year. Fire communications, again, we did not ask for any funds this year. So it was really just the, fire equipment, or the fire vehicle CIP, that we were created, or Pat and Eleanor worked on last year and created. So we're gonna ask for that funding, the ambulance
New warrant
funding.
and a new, is it gonna be a new capital reserve?
No, that's the $200,000.
No, that's the $200,000 for the fire apparatus.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
So that $200,000 that we received this year will then be in turn to pay the vehicle off. And then we asked for 50,000 again to stay on track with the ambulance replacement. And then we asked for $5,000 for, equipment replacement to go on that new line, if there's any big ticket items that they can come out of that line. So, and that was, we did ask originally for another pickup truck, because we had asked 2 years ago, he asked to push it off for a couple of years, so we did that. So the concern is, in this vehicle would be to replace the Suburban, which is a 2000, you know, the vehicle highlights, the 2011. It's got almost 147,000 miles on it. It did pass inspection this year, but in talking with the mechanics, they don't feel it's going to pass next year with body rot and some other stuff. So in anticipation of that not lasting all of next year, we're asking for, funds to replace that as well and to outfit it. And one of the issues that we're coming across is, vehicles right now are, one, you can't get them, and the prices do jack up, significantly. So in talking to dealerships and everybody, even if I were to order today, it's still potentially 10 months out to get it. So if we were to wait for, town meeting or whatever, we're still not talking until next January 23, you know, December 22, January 23 before we even get something. So the concern is gonna be what's gonna happen if the Suburban, because it's up for inspection in September.
But you're getting your new truck pretty soon.
What's that?
You're getting your new pickup soon.
It should have been here in April of last year, so, April of this year, so.
Yeah, so, yeah, we're still waiting
So
on
what do you got? Can you use that, keep that as a spare?
that. The Suburban?
Oh, it is a Suburban.
So, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But you do have, you've got another department pickup.
We have utility, but it's that time of year that it needs to stay here in case of.
So in concerns with the increases in budget and payroll, that warrant article was removed for the
It was removed.
Went to the select, and it was removed because it just financially does not seem like it's the right time. So, you know, nursing the Suburban along as we absolutely can, and then if for some reason we run into a major issue with it, coming up with a solution at that point, we'll, you know, keep our fingers crossed that we head down this mechanical pathway.
Sounds like a good plan. All right. Any, we voted on the budget, I did have that question, why we have a fire department here and the supervisors, I just said, any other further fire related questions? I guess not, I just wanna get, sometimes we get swamped by all these warrants, so I wanted to tap your thoughts on the warrants in advance. Okay,
Yeah, this discussion, Mr. Chairman, on the building addition.
okay, sure, yeah, you mentioned that, yeah, if you wanna,
On the addition of the building itself, or?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I will say, the new building official, Mr. Packman, and myself, have had some conversation about the fire station. The selectmen originally were gonna bring forth a warrant article for setting aside some money for it. Not to speak for the selectmen, but some conversations came up, is that we really don't have a plan yet. So I believe in the building budget that will be presented by Mr. Packman, there's some money in there to figure out a plan, a long-term plan for the fire station as to what it needs, what needs to be fixed, how do we fix it, to get, you know, the next 40, 50 years out of it without having to keep reinvesting smaller sums. So we spend the money, we want to spend it right. So I think that most things have been kind of put on hold until we get something back on that.
So no immediate need, it's more just planning for the future?
There are definitely immediate needs, but why would we replace something if that doesn't make sense because a year from now we're gonna take it out? So we'd rather make sure that we have a plan to move forward with, again, like the capital for the vehicles, make sure that we have a plan to move forward with this building, instead of just throwing money to fix things that, you know.
So we'll invest some money in the plan, presumably, because
Yes.
we're in the buildings, and then we'll see what happens. It will be at least a year out before we get.
Correct. Correct. We've been in it this long, let's make sure we have the right plan instead of doing it twice.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd like to get a architectural design of, you know, what, you know, I mean, we all have an image of what a fire station should look like, and honestly, chief, that's not mine. So we'd like to get an architect design of what the station of the future should look like. And that'll give us a better idea of how much we need to put aside and how much we need to start saving for that eventual.
Yeah.
The space needs and assessments and that type of stuff.
Fire trucks are not getting any smaller.
Yeah.
And anyone who's been in there to see how that ladder truck fits, it's very tight. And knowing that down the road we're gonna have to replace it, I'm willing to bet a replacement would not fit. So I think making sure we fix the problem the first time instead of fixing it 4 times makes the most sense for the taxpayers to do it.
So a little history that probably only John would know. The selectman's office was to the left,
Yes.
the police department, I think, was to the right, and the fire was in the center. I mean, the civic center, all three were in the
Yeah.
That was the town hall.
Yep.
That's what we had.
everything.
You probably remember that, don't you?
I do. That's when Jen used to babysit.
Yeah. I didn't say that publicly. We're not the same age.
We get that.
Is that on the record?
It used to be that during a town meeting, the alarm would go off and all the volunteer firemen would leave the engines and stuff. We're warming up and, you know, okay, we're gonna have to adjourn this meeting for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Trucks would leave and
Yeah.
we reconvene. Any other, old business to come before this time? Okay, so have a good Christmas, everyone. And we'll be back on duty in January. I guess I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion, a second? All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chiefs? Engineers? Good job.
Unfortunately, you should have an even hand as to how it goes. On Monday, we're gonna talk about this, and then the other way, the next meeting, we're gonna talk about
But the business meeting is different.
with a different hand. And it's more for people to have an even hand as much as possible.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do, right? Also,
Roll 'em up.
That's the one I'm joking. My gear cost me money because I gotta sew 2 sets together. When I first saw you, I thought you were just a funny guy.
Automatically, the other one is, I don't know. But.
There's always issues here or there, but then major part of our size, full disclosure. This time you just need yeah, that's been the big issue.
Yeah, but then within 1 year, so anyway, you know, it's more even.
Yeah, so it's gonna build a Carl or.
I don't know, it just seems awkward.
Well, I don't have a name, I have an instrument, water jar, so if you're, well, it's a matter, what you have, it's actually complicated, because first you have to source the wool,
Oh, yeah.
and then you have to have the wool delivered to the weavers. And so the weavers will weave anything they want, right? So if you say, look, I wanna have it done, it's gonna be weaved 1910 with, so
It's gonna cost them more. It's gonna cost you another 500.
they first make the yarn, they roast the yarn, and then several strands of yarn twist around together. You get a really high quality wool.
I never saw
One unit was made, most of
Nah, you guys are great.
whereas
Yeah,
later
yeah,
on,
yeah.
cheaper kinds of hair. And the other problem
Last year, so.
is that you will get the
Back
best
touches.
touches.
Right, and that's one of the things is that I have stored
And twist them together. And now they do just so, but if you want, you can get a chest hair, you send it to the weaver, and say, look, I wanna have four, there's a terminology for it. You say, I wanna have 4 bound together, they'll make it for you. So I was thinking, you know, if I could just get that together, because it would be great, it's not actually a real. But all I have is a list of pieces.
I will say though, well, not with
It's just a process of buying our clothing.
That's how it's because we have
Yeah, that was a long
To sort of make that summary, you know, kind of, what's the life, I don't know, just as it works.
Yeah.
Those numbers, you know, I think, you know, maybe over, like the new year, a few days to. Yeah, I think that would be useful. I'm hoping to have a Christmas party, but, it's a lot of, I most of those, kind of work in your town,
So they keep it up, it's movable up.
Get me in the
Two,
wood.
two says when you wrap a rope around the fire, it wasn't a real thing. It's a fire truck, you know, so the NFPA doesn't guide us specifically. Straight stick wires
I know,
are
it's bad enough that like when they disappear.
The bucket is anywhere from 750 inches, so ours is a load on rings, up to 1,500. The reason ours is 750 is if you have a steel ladder, it's 1,500 pounds, underneath the bucket, there are 2 handles, and they're rated. So each handle is rated at 375 a piece, to give a total of 750 where you anchor the 2 together. So, yeah. It's not.
Well, when you consider standard fall protection is 5,000 pounds.
Correct.
Right, so standard fall protection is 5,000 pounds.
Correct.
And if you're on a horizontal life safety line, it's double or 10,000 pounds. Right, so it's not that much.
No, well, we're not talking about a shuffle. So all of our stuff, see, there's no dynamic. So even like our rope now, all set, there's no dynamic anymore.
Remember the old days when we had the dynamic stuff? Yeah.
Everything's not, so that you don't, because none of the anchor doesn't have to.
No, I mean, in theory, you don't push off it, but you slip and fall, but you catch yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because even,
Oh, I know.
even with the payout, you still.
Oh, it hurts, yeah.
And I was wondering about
It's all God's creatures.
pickup trucks the other day. I drove by and I was like, man.
Did you see the white one there when I'm driving? I'm like, I like to drive my new truck around, so. What it is.
Yeah, no, it just.
So it was like, I had a big, in that, and they told her, they added him, sitting with the done. No chip. No chip. So, and it's coming, and trying to be proactive, we ordered the equipment for the truck, the cap, all the stuff, because they were talking 8, 10, 12 weeks out for that.
Right.
So now we're kind of pigeonholed, we can't just walk, and it wouldn't matter, you can't walk away to anybody else anyways, because no one can get it.
No.
And the thing that we're planning to do is, so price of a state business. The state goes out to bid, great price, top pricing.
Yeah.
Most manufacturers aren't even giving pricing. Like Chevy will not allow, and Ford, as far as I can find, did not do any state bid pricing. So, you're buying a truck down at market price when you were buying it for, you know.
Yeah, that's
next to
ridiculous,
nothing.
cause I mean, I've got a friend with a 350 Super Duty
Mhm.
crew cab
Yeah.
that was, I don't know, 4 years old, and they gave him exactly what he paid for it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The dealership bought it back so that they could resell it.
Yeah.
They went and offered him,
Right.
I think it was like, I think they offered him like $67,000 for it.
Yeah.
So the same truck last year to this year, $16,000 increase. Same truck. So, I mean, that's gonna be when, you know, if we have to go out and like just outright buy one, now you're talking $60,000.
Yeah.
You know, $50,000, $60,000 anyway, so it's like,
Absolutely.
trying to be financially responsible,
Yeah,
but also proactive, that you know this is gonna happen, this is, you know.
right, the lead times are getting ridiculous on everything.
10 months.
They're saying minimum 10 months.
Yeah.
And realistically, they're saying we wouldn't see anything. If we ordered it January 1, you won't see it until 2023.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad for people,